I think what I'll do is I'll disconnect the television so I won't be using so much bandwidth. Maybe that's what I'll do. Is it getting better?
Yeah, it seems to be okay right now.
Okay, so if it goes bad, I'll just shut off the television. Yes, we don't have to watch television while we're learning. We'll be okay. Okay. Anyway, there's no one here to watch, so so let's see the Heilige Gemara. Yesterday, the Gemara had an interesting question. The Gemara asked, in the case where someone's wife went away on a trip with her sister's husband, and while she was away with her sister's husband, she and her sister's husband behaved perfectly, but they got messages back home at the ranch that they were no longer alive. And because of that, the husband at home married his wife's sister. So we learned that the Mishnah told us that he's good, he gets his wife back, because just because he lived the Assur with her sister-in-law, that has no impact on his marriage. He's still mutter to his wife. However, his wife's sister and her husband, their marriage breaks up because she, as an Eishes was metamatachas baila, she lived the Assur with her sister's husband. So the Gemara asked, I don't understand. The same way this woman did an Assur, she becomes Assur to her husband. Why don't we say that since this husband lived with his sister-in-law, the Assur, that should Assur him to his wife? So the Gemara answered, which brought us onto the top of Dav Tzaddik Amud Aleph. The Eishes Ish who married her brother-in-law, she did it b'shoigi, but the Rabbanan are goizer to Assur her to her husband, even though she was over b'shoigi, because if she would have done it b'mezid, in fact, she would be Assur to her husband midaraisa. But one who has relations with his wife's sister, even if he does it b'mezid, he still doesn't become Assur to his wife. So therefore, if he did it b'shoigig, we're not going to Assur him to his wife. And that took us to the second line on the top of Dav Tzaddik Amud Aleph. So Achois Isha, if someone lives with his wife's sister while she's still alive, the b'mezid lo yasir midaraisa. Even if he did it b'mezid, avad he's chayiv kares, but it doesn't Assur him to his wife midaraisa. So therefore, b'shogig, if he only did it b'shogig, like gazru bo rabbanan, the rabbanan will not Assur him to his wife. Zok the Gemara umino lo lo yasir. How do we know that it's not Assur midaraisa? How do we know that if someone lives with his wife's sister, that he does not become Assur to his wife? The Tanya we learned. Oisa. It says in the pasuk about an Eishes Ish, V'shachav Ish Oisa. If someone lives with an Eishes Ish. So we darshan Oisa shechivasa Israsa. The only thing that asks a woman to her husband is if she herself has an illegal, intimate relationship. But the ein shechivasa choisa Israsa. But just because her sister had an intimate relationship with her husband, that would not Assur her to her husband. Now, why would I need a pasuk to tell me that the Assur of Chois Isha does not Assur the wife? Why would I think it would Assur the wife? The wife didn't do anything wrong. Zok Gemara, because I would have had a kal v'chomer. Sheyocha, v'alaydinu. I'm going to bring you a kal v'chomer that if someone has relations with his wife's sister, that his wife should be Assur to him. And how does the kal v'chomer work? V'alaydinu. Uma b'mokin. Shabal is her kal. Malach in a case where there was a light Assur that was violated. And the light Assur that was violated, Rashi tells us, is referring to an Eishes Ish Zinsa. So you would get shocked. Can the Gemara refer to an Eishes Ish Zinsa as kal? And at the bottom of the Amid, the Gemara is going to actually probe to figure out what Isser Kal means. I'm already telling you now what the maskana of the Gemara later is. And of course, the Gemara didn't want to jump to Eishes Ish, because how could you refer to Eishes Ish as an Isser Kal? The Gemara ends up saying the reason why it's an Isser Kal is because in the life of the Isra, who answers an Eishes Ish to the world? Her husband, right? By marrying her. In his life, she could become mutter. If he gave her a get, so even though she's Assur now, but if he gave her a get, she would be mutter now in his life. Mashenkin, we're comparing it to a Chais Isha. A Chais Isha, as long as his wife is alive, forever it will be Assur for him to have relations with his wife's sister. So therefore, his wife is a much stronger Oiser. His wife makes this woman Assur to her husband as long as she's alive. He only makes his wife Assur as long as he doesn't give her a get. So in that respect, Eishes Ish is Kal. So Ma'abar Mokim, Shabal Isser Kal, Nesar, Oiser, Madich, if a foreign man is boil, an Eishes Ish, that we're referring to as an Isser Kal, Nesar HaOiser, the husband becomes Assur. So the husband is called the Oiser, because the fact that he married this woman, he made her Assur for the rest of the world. So Ma'abar Mokim, Shabal Isser Kal, Nesar HaOiser, Madich, when some strange man is ba on the Isser Kal, on the Eishes Ish, the husband, who is the Oiser, also becomes Assur now to live with this woman. Mokim Shabal Isser Chomer, if you have a man who's ba on Chais Ishtoi, which is an Isser Chomer, because it remains Assur as long as his wife is alive, Einoi Din, Shenesar Oiser, surely the Oiser should remain Assur. Who's the Oiser? The Oiser is his wife. His wife makes her sister Assur to him. So Madich, the Oiser becomes Assur by an Eishes Ish, where the Oiser is the husband. Kol Shekain, the Oiser should become Assur by a Chais Isha, which is a more severe Isser. So that's why the pasuk tells us that's not a Kal V'chomer you should make, and therefore, even though someone lived with a Chais Ishtoi, he still remains mutter to his wife. Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda said, there's a machlokes that we're going to discuss. And Dr. Rabbi Yehuda, the machlokes that we're going to discuss, everybody agrees that if someone has relations with his mother-in-law, he is now Assur to live with his wife. If someone lives with his mother-in-law, he is now Assur to live with his wife. Everybody agrees that that's the case. Of course, we're going to need to know a makar for that, right? And of course, the Gemara is going to discuss a makar. But right now, we're just reading the halacha. So
and that's without condition or with the
so therefore, so where is there a machlokes between Beishamai and Basil? So Beishamai seems to agree with the Kal V'chomer that we made, and he holds in fact that if someone lives with his wife's sister, he now becomes Assur to his wife. You have a Kal V'chomer. I guess he doesn't dash on the Chayso. The Gemara will clarify too. Rabbi Yosy argued with Rabbi Yehuda's perspective as to how he understood the machlokes Beishamai and Basil, and he said, everybody agrees that we have the limit of Isa, and therefore, even if someone is ba al achos ishtoi, nevertheless, his wife will be mutter to him. Where is there a disagreement? Is beba chamoisai. If one has relations with his mother-in-law, should be Beishamai and Paisel. Beishamai holds it passes. Will be still loy Paisel, and we still holds it doesn't pass it. And now we're going to get into the reasoning for some of these things. There's a very interesting shaila discussed in the Noid of Yehuda. Rechmana Latzlon, someone who lived in his mother-in-law's household, came to the Noid of Yehuda, and told him that for the past years, I was over many, many times with Chamoisi many, many times. And he had a twofold question. He wanted to do tshuva. Of course, he doesn't want to do it anymore, but he has a twofold question. A, what do I do to be Mesakin, such a horrific Avera? And B, do I have to tell my father-in-law? Because my father-in-law is be'etzim also to his wife now, because she was zintzatachah. So Rachman al-Thon, this is the shayla that was asked to the Noid of Yehuda. That's right. I mean, depending, we pack on halachamas. I don't think it has. Right. But so the Noid of Yehuda, Lagabi, how to do tshuva, he says this isn't just one Avera. This is over the course of the years, who knows how many Averas you did. He says if we're going to talk about Tshuvas HaMishkol, even if you fasted every day for the rest of your life, you're not even Mesakin once. One beer. Kol Shekin, the Kol Shekin, what you have over here. So he says, listen, I'm not an expert in these things. He's not, who is. And he said what you have to do is you have to do Torah, and do Chesed, and be none of, you do the things that all of the Svarim say you have to do Shuvah. But it says, as far as telling, he also was Mesupik, if he should tell. Because on the one hand, there's a Svara of Kavod Abrius. You're messing up this guy's life. And maybe you shouldn't tell him. L'moshel, let's say there's a Kohen who's taking a shower. So that means he's butt naked. And a mess dies, and someone dies in the house. Are you supposed to right away run to the Kohen and say there's a mess in the house? He has to dash out of the house without clothing? Or should you better wait until he comes out of the shower and then he's dressed and then tell him to get out of the house right away? Or what if someone's walking in the street and he's wearing a beggar that you know is shabbos? Are you supposed to tell him in the street that it's shabbos and he has to get dressed in the street? So there's a big shaila about what you're supposed to do. So the Noid of Yehuda was mamish mesupik. He went back and forth. I don't know if he came out with a klor psak. He didn't know what to tell this person. On the one hand, this person, how could you be machshel a man that's living for years with his wife and it's going to be also to him? On the other hand, maybe you shouldn't mess things up. So these are shilas that actually happen even nowadays. There's only wissen from die Sachen. Okay,
why wouldn't we say Ein Adam Mitzvah Rasha? There's no Adam that this happened. Why should we believe him? Maybe he's trying to mess up his father-in-law.
So that is one of the times. Beautiful. That's one of the times that the Noid of Yehuda discusses. He wouldn't be Nemon anyway, so he's still making trouble. That's right. So Reb Moshe says that often. That's right. But this is a complicated situation. It's a very complicated situation. These are Yishmak Yishailas to discuss academically in a Besmedrash. But Chas v'Sholom Rachman Flan, these things should never happen. These are just as tragic as the stories that lead to evil, if not more. And Basil says, Loi Paisel, it doesn't pass. Now let's go through the logic. Lafi, Shebetchila hu muter b'chol anoshim shaboilim. Lechatchila, before Reuben married Leah, Reuben was able to marry any woman in the world. He muteris b'chol anoshim shaboilim. And Leah could marry any man in the world. Kitchahu, Kitcha, if he was Makalish, if Reuben was Makalish Leah, who Isra, he asks her on many people, on every man in the world, the Yasrasai. And she also asks him on all of her kroibis. Meruba Isra Asra me Yisur Shashartuhu. He was asking her on many more men, such as every other man, than the amount of people who she answered him on. Shahu Asra b'chol anoshim shaba'ila. He asked her to have relations with any man in the world. She only answered him on her relatives. So Ayvazai, let's make a kavachayim. Valaydinu umahu she'asher b'chol anashim shebe'olam madich, him who answered her. He's a strong oyster because he answered her on all men in the world. Nevertheless, shigiga ba'asherla, if she was mezana b'shoygit, two Adam came and told her she's allowed to, that he died. Einu neseres b'mutula, she doesn't become usher to her husband. He, her, shalo yasar tu, ela b'kroy b'isel. She's not such a big usher. She only answered him on her relatives, not on every other woman. So shogag ba'asalai, if he was shogig, if he lived with his sister-in-law b'shogig, eino din shaloi nesar b'muter loy, kol shekain he shouldn't be also b'muter loy. So you have over here a kal v'chomer. You have over here a kal v'chomer that Beis Hillel is bringing to say that it shouldn't passel him. It shouldn't passel him because madich b'shogig doesn't passel her to him when she's also on everybody. Him who's not also on everybody, surely shogig shouldn't passel him. I'm sorry.
You're using the strength of what he did as opposed to who you're actually doing the same with. If he's doing it with anybody, he's looking to it.
No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about what if he was shogig with her sister. So there's a chi of chorus there. So we're saying madich her issur, which is very severe, she's also to everybody. If she did it shogig, she's still mutter to him. So him, if he did an issur b'shogig, what a serious issur, but he did it b'shogig, it should also be also. Well, she's a nation shezinsa. He's living with a chaysa.
When he's living with the chaysa, he doesn't get.
No, that's not the kabbalah. Madach her, who's also al kol ha'olam. So it's a big issur. If she's mezana b'shogig, she's still mutter to her husband. Correct. Everyone's equally also to her. Even if there's no idus, if she admitted it, she did it b'shogig. The shogig was the two Eidim came and said that he died. Right. It's a real shogig.
It's only a single kind of incident she did.
Whatever she did it, she was over. She was in South Asia.
But it's not any shogig that she had. She had a certain kind of shogig. She's in, but it's in because of two items.
Right. So we're discussing the same thing. So to him, if he married his sister-in-law, because two items came and said that she was dead, again, he shouldn't be also his wife. It's the same case. So Zok Gemara, very good. This is a very good raya for shogig, that she doesn't become false. But lemezid minayin. How do we know that if he was over mezid, that he would be mutter to her? A woman is mezana b'mezid is also to her husband. How do we know if someone has illegal relations b'mezid with his wife's sister? How do we know that he's still mutter to his wife? Talmud Loimar, for that you need the pasuk. Oisa, like we said earlier, it says the shachav is oisa davka adeshisish. Oisa shchivas oitzrasa vein shchivas achoisa oitzrasa. If a man is mezana with his wife's sister, he does not answer his wife on about it. So what we have not yet clarified is why anybody would hold that chamoisai would answer him on his wife, right? Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, everybody holds chamoisai answers him on his wife, and according to Rabbi Yosy, there's a machlokes if chamoisai answers him on his wife. That we haven't answered, but we still have to get to that. It says the shachab ish oisa. It's soiter. That's right. That's right. It's soiter. So we look the pasuk with b'midbar hay. So it's mamish this week's parsha. Oh, so once again we call the Lublina strikes again because we're learning in the daf something that we're going to learn this week. Beautiful. Oh, shkoyach for bringing that up. Zok the Gemara weiter. So now let's have a look a little bit about chamoisa. So Zok the Gemara. Amar Abami, Amar Ashlakish. My time with Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said that everybody agrees that if someone is ba chamoisai, he becomes asur on his wife. What's the reason for this? The chesivit says by chamoisai, but eish yisrafu oisai ve'aseh. It says in the pasuk that if he's mezana with his mother-in-law, we should burn them in fire. So it sounds like it's even including his own wife. Should his wife also get treifa? What did she do wrong? She didn't do anything wrong. She's an innocent victim. Therefore, since you can't say it means she should be chayiv treifa, she didn't do an aveira. Let's say it applies to answering for her. So that's the whole makar. The makar, if someone is mizana with his mother-in-law, why his wife becomes usher to him? Because the pasuk says, "Beis Yisrafu Oisai V'Ased," which is mashma. Everybody involved in this three-way triangle gets killed. Avada, you can't say that an innocent woman should get killed. So we say it means she's usher to her husband. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, ain't halacha kabidah. The halacha is not like kabidah. Avada, if someone's baal chamoisa, his wife does not become usher. Ahud avaditur bechamsei. There was once upon a time there's a big tzaddik who did an affair with his mother-in-law. Also Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda took him. Not they gave him malchus. I think not giving to give him malchus. Okay. Amar le, he told him, he loved Amar Shmuel ain't halacha Rabbi Yehuda. If it wasn't for the fact that Shmuel said Allah is not like Rabbi Yehuda, Asrisa Allah Isur Allah. I would have asked your wife on you forever, and that would have really messed you up. You're lucky that Shmuel said ain't halacha Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to go back to our previous kavachim. In our previous kavachim, we said ma dechan iser kal, like Asus ish. Ma dechan iser kal, like Asus ish. Let's go back to this kavachim because we need to remember. Uma b'mokim shabal iser kal. Nesar ha'oiser madich. If someone's bal Asus ish, the oiser, which is the husband, he created the whole iser. He becomes usher on his wife. Mokim shabal iser chamer. If someone has relations with his wife's sister, which is an Isser Chomer, because that's an Isser that remains as long as his wife is alive, surely his wife should become Usher to him. That was the Kavach. But now we're going to try to start from scratch to understand Isser Kal. So let's put aside from our minds that Isser Kal means Yeshish Ish, and let's open our minds up to consider other possibilities. My Isser Kal in this Kavach. It's referring to an Isser Kal, which is merely an Isser Lav. Someone who's Machshur B'Shasai Mishanisis. So let's think how this works. Bo'ela Hai. Reuben married a woman and then divorced her. Okay. Then this woman went and married Shimon. Bo'ela Hai. Shimon was Ba on this woman. Asur Alei Dahai. Now this woman becomes Asur to Reuben. So who is the Oyser? We'll refer to the Oyser as Shimon. Shimon is the Oyser. So Maba Isra Kal. Isra Kal, like a simple lav of Machshur Geshosei, where the Oyser who is Shimon, because he answers this woman to Reuven, Ba Idich, if Reuven illegally was Ba on his first wife, after Shimon divorced her and was over a lav, now Osra Alei Dahai. Now it's also also to Shimon, because now it's also Machshir Rishasa Mishanisis for Shimon as well. So if that's what the Kavachim is, Madach and Isra Kal, where the Oyser, who is Shimon, if Reuben lives with this woman, the Oyser becomes Osir. This woman now becomes Osir to Shimon as well, surely by Achois Ishta. Correct, that wouldn't be a good Kavachim. So that can't be the Kala. You know what? Because Mala Machshir Rishasa Mishanisis Shigedit Mago. By Machzuk B'Shashim Mishanisis, you know why? You know why there it's Neser Oyser? Because it's the woman who became Tomei. The woman was Nival by this other person. Masha Enkein, when you're born your sister-in-law, it doesn't create Tumah in your wife. This nus didn't happen with your wife. This nus happened with your sister-in-law. So Shekeinit Mahagov. So Achois Isha is much worse. So maybe only over there. Maybe only over there, do you say, what did we want to say? We wanted to say, Madach over there, it's Netzer Oyser. Madach over there, it's Netzer Oyser. Madach B'Isser Kal, where it's Netzer Oyser. Let me look then. Maba Mokim Shabal Isser Kal, Netzer Oyser, Mokim Shabal Isser Chomer, and you didn't, Shenesher Oyser. So he says, Ma Lashom, but Ma by the Isser Kal, where it's Nitma Guf. That's why it's Netzer Oyser. But who said it should be Nesher Oyser by Chayzisha? So it's not a good Kavachimer. Visura B'Roi, Rashi says does not belong here, so we'll ignore these two words. Visura Isser Olam, by Machzuk Rishosoi, it's also Isser Olam. By a Chayzisha, it's not also Isser Olam, it's only also until your wife dies. So that's not a good Kavachimer, that can't be what the Kal is. Alamar Ishlokish, maybe the Kal is Yevama, is an Isser Lav for Yevama to marry, not the Yavam, right? To Lycia, So Yevam Alaman. Let's.
But before also, when Bu'ala Choisai, it's not Nitma Guf and his wife. Why should she become?
That's right. It's not Nitma Guf. That's exactly right. It's not Nitma Guf. But Machshir Rishos, it's Nitma Guf. It's the same woman who is Nitma. Precisely what you're saying. Zok the Gemara, Eli Amar Shlokish Yevam Alaman. So who was?
It's because he did the other right, that's why she become the pusik that we have.
I'm trying to know, what did I say that you're asking the kash on? I'm trying to understand what you're asking, on what you're asking.
Every issue that we spoke here, it's not because the abide happened with this woman. That's why she becomes the Usaba. Right? His wife didn't do anything. And she becomes us.
Wife becomes user?
Yeah, well, is not.
Wife doesn't become user.
Yeah, it's when in the Halu, since she passed into it.
Right. So you want to before we have any psikim, we want to make a kol v'choyim. You don't have a kol v'choyim. What do you want to bring a raya? You want to bring a raya that if someone is bal achoisoi, his wife should be ushered in. Where is there a raya? You have to bring. Where would you bring a raya from? You have to have a raya for it. So either you have a kol v'choyim or you have a pasuk. So the Gemara tries to the kol v'choyim and the Gemara slugs it up from the pasuk. But now we're struggling to find what the kol v'choyim is from. So Elamar Shlokish Yevama. Maybe you have a raya from Yevama. Yevama Laman. Exactly who was this Yevama Nesser by? Ilay Mala'acher. If you're talking about a Yevama who instead of doing Yibam, she married a regular guy. A Yevama Lashuk, exactly. Who Rav Hamnuna, and we're following Rav Hamnuna Shita, the Amar Rav Hamnuna, Shemeres Yavam Shazinsa, Assur Liyavam. Shemeres Yavam with his nus could no longer do Yibam anymore. So then, what would the kol v'choyim be? Let's go back to the Gemara to get it clear. Uma be'isur akal. Uma b'vok m'shabal isur kal. Madich, when someone was born in isur kal, meaning someone was born a Yevama, nesar ha'isur, the Yavam becomes usher to do Yibam now. Right? Originally, why was a strange man not allowed to marry this woman? Because the Yavam masters her. She has zika to the Yavam. So madech v'makom shabal isur kal, nesar the Yavam becomes usher. Makom shabal isur chomer. If someone is born on a chayis ishtoi, which is an isur chomer, which is a chiv karis, ain't a din shenesar isur. So that's not a good kol v'chomer either. Is Mali Yevama Shkenit Maguf. It's the same svar. It's the same woman who became Nesar. Masha Enkein by Chaisisha, the guf that was Nitma was the sister-in-law, and we're talking about the wife. The Isura Barayv, here Isura Barayv makes sense, because Isura Barayv means that a Yevama Lashuk is usher for everybody. It's not only usher to specific people, a Yevama Lashuk is usher for everybody. Right? So there's a chaymer over there as well, and so therefore you don't have, that's not a good right. Ella, maybe it's Yevama la'ach. Maybe we're talking about the Isser Kal when the Yevama was locked up by one of the brothers. So let's figure out what the case is. Avad b'maimer. What if one of the brothers did maimer? Right. So if one of the brothers did maimer, hi. Asra alei dahai. The brother who did Maimer now makes it that all the other brothers are Asr midrabanan to do Yibam. But this whole shayla is a drabanan as well. So Maimer, hi Asra dahai. The person who did Maimer, Asr did on everybody else. So now the Asr is the person who did the Maimer. What if one of the other brothers made Yibam on her, even though he wasn't allowed to? Asra alei. Also like the now the fellow who did the mimer is also to her because midaraisha she's fully married to the brother who did Yibum. So once again, we're trying to prove that it's a bia ha'asura that causes Isser. Here, it's not the bia ha'asura, the fact that his brother made Yibum, that made it usher to the brother who did mimer, because my irya shabal sheni afilu avad banami mimer. If the second brother does mimer on her, it also asks this woman to the first. So we're trying to show up Zachaymer because it is her bia. The whole parsha of Yibam, it has nothing to do with bia. Because even if the other brother did mimer without a bia, so there was no issue involved, it would still answer to the first brother. That's not fair. Let's say we hold like Rabbi Gamliel, Domer ein maimer acher maimer. According to Gamliel, the second person's maimer has zero impact. So you can't ask me, it's not Bia that did it. Anything can do it like maimer, because maimer wouldn't do it. But even if you hold a maimer acher maimer, but Allah fil noshon la get. What if one brother did maimer and then the second brother gave her a get? That will now answer it on the brother who did maimer. If one brother did maimer and another brother did chalitza, it would also answer it on the brother. So this has nothing to do with Bia Asura, so you can't bring me any right from me. Let's say it was a Saita. What is the exact case of Saita? Saita Laman. Who are we talking about? Who the Isser is to? Ilema Labal. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Ba'aleh Baal. Asra Allah the boy. What happened? Rashi tells us there was a Saita who we don't know if she was Insa or not. She was Nistera. Therefore, we now need to make her drink from the Mayim to be Boidiker. Right? I'm sorry? She's usher to her husband during that time. And if it was Bala Baal, what if the Baal was Bala? Right? So what that does is now it will permanently answer her to the boil. You know why? Because she'll never be able to be exonerated. Once he is Bala, the Mayim aren't Boidik anymore. You don't come up, so she remains in limbo and she'll remain usher to both of them forever. The Ilam of the Baal, Bala Baal, usher the boil, my ear your Bala, his Bia, I feel nothing like get. Even if the husband who's choshed his wife, and now she has to go drink from the Mesaita, even if he gave her a get at that time, or Vafilu Omar ain't ani mashka, I don't want to give her to drink, that's enough to answer her on the boil forever. So once again, that's not a good example, because we're looking for something where the Bia creates this. Ella Saita the boil. We're talking about Saita the boil, meaning the boil answered her. The husband was the oyster who answered her on the boil, and if the boil is boiler, he answers this woman on her husband, which is exactly the case that we started with. In fact, Mahai Isser Kalu, Isser Chamaru. This is not an Isser Kal. This is an Isser of a Chiv Daraisa. Isser Chamaru. The Hainu Eishes. That's Eishes. Ella Amaraba Eishes. The Taka means a regular Eishes. Means Eishes. But my correlate Isser Kal. Why do we refer to Eishes? This is an Isser Kal. The man who married her and made her usher isn't answering her forever, because if he gives her a get, she will now become mutter in his lifetime. But Achois Isha is an Isser Chomer, because his wife's sister is usher to him even if he gives his wife a get. She's usher to him until his wife dies. Tanya Nami Hachi, Abba Chanan Omar Mishumar Belazar, Eishasish. The Kal is Eishasish. And the Kal V'chomer is as follows. Let me just finish to the two dots. Uma b'mokim habal Isser Kal. She'ena Oisher Oisher Kol Yama. Madech someone who's born the Eishasish, which is an Isser Kal, because the husband doesn't answer her all the days of his life. Nevertheless, Neser Oisher, the husband will become Asur. Habal Isser Chomer. If someone is born on a Chos Ishtoi, She'oisra, his wife who made this woman Asur to him, Oisher Kol Yama, makes this woman usher to him as long as she's alive. Surely the wife who's the usher should also be usher to her husband. Only an ish whose mezana becomes usher to her husband. A woman will never become usher because her sister was mezana.
Why is this Ish called again?
Because the Eishes is not usher to everybody as long as this man is alive. Because if this man would have given her a get, she becomes mutter even while he's alive. But a Chos Isha is usher to him even if they get divorced. A Chos Isha is still usher to him as long as his wife is still alive. I'm sorry? It's all her life. It's the life of the Oyser. An Ish does not answer a woman the entire life of the Iser, because if he gives a get, in the life of the Iser, the woman will become mutter l'shuk. But a Chos Isha, in the life of the Iser, as long as this woman is alive, her sister will always be Assur. Okay, so now we're up to a little bit of a complicated one. And if you remember, let's go back to the Mishnah. If Yosef made a very cryptic comment. Before we get into what Rabbi Yossi is talking about, I want to open our minds up a little bit. First thing I want to focus on is what Rabbi Yossi was commenting on. Rabbi Yossi was commenting on the Tanna Kama. The Tanna Kama says that it's a man's world. If a woman is noyav tachas baila, with the enei echad, she'll be usher to her baal, right? So in the case where a woman went away with her sister's husband, and her husband stayed home with her sister, and her husband and her both thought that both people who traveled died, so then they got married. So what happens is when this couple, when the other half of each couple comes back, the man who stayed home, who had a relation with his sister-in-law, he can go back to live with his wife. But his brother-in-law cannot go back to living with his wife because she was so she becomes also. So he has it good, but his brother-in-law has it bad, right? That's what Rabbi Yossi is commenting on. Rabbi Yossi is going to be arguing on that in some way or another. We're going to see how he argues. That's the first point I want to bring up. The second point I want to bring up is I'm going to ask you a question based on what we've learned to date. If a woman, her husband travels to Medina Sayyam, and then an Eid Echad comes along and says that he died, and because of that she remarried, and then her husband comes back, we cancel her, and she's usher to her husband, right? Why is she usher to her husband? So what we learned up until this date is we cancel her because she didn't investigate it properly. So I want you to open your mind because today we're going to learn that there's a shita who argues on that. Avada, she's usher, but she's not usher because we cancel her. She's going to be usher for a different reason, and we're going to see the reason, and it's going to have nafkaminas. So that's why I said it's a little complicated because it's going to change our perception, our understanding of the free sugya. Up until now, the only reason why we said a woman would be usher is because we consider her that she wasn't medayik properly. We're soon going to see that's not an issue at all, according to Rabbi Yossi, and he has a whole different reason why a woman cannot go back to her husband. So now let's get started with the Gemara on Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi Mekol Shapois. So let's just focus on what he says clearly. He says, Kol Shapois al Yidei Acherim, and the title of the words is, if the other guy would be possible, if the brother-in-law can no longer marry his wife, I can no longer live with my wife. But if my brother-in-law could continue to live with his wife, I could continue to live with my wife. So you see right away how he's departing from what the Tanna Kama said. The Tanna Kama said, Yener can't live with his wife, but I can live with my wife. But Yossi said, no, if you can live with his wife, I can live with my wife. If not, no, we're both in the same boat. So we're going to have to understand why are we both in the same boat. Michael Amar Rabbi Yossi, what exactly did Rabbi Yossi mean to say? Ilema, if you're going to say he's responding to the Tanna Kama, because Amar Tanna Kama, does at least the Yisrael lived in Sayyam. Eishes Kisa is a Sira. The Ishtai, sorry, I'm good. I could live with my wife. My brother-in-law's in trouble. And on that, Rabbi Yossi comments, but Kamala Rabbi Yossi, no. The Ishtai, sorry. The same way your wife is mutter to you, Eishes Gisa Nami Shari, your brother-in-law is allowed to live with your sister. If that's what Rabbi Yossi meant, and he was coming to tell you a kula over what the Tanna Kama said, because he's being matter the brother-in-law, well, ihachi, kol she'ein poisel al yidei acherim, ein poisel al yidei atzmai. It should say the opposite. It should say kol she'ein poisel al yidei atzmai, ein poisel al yidei acherim yiboyel. What is Rabbi Yossi saying? Since I can live with my wife, he could live with his wife. So, but that's not what he said. He said since he could live with his wife, I can live with my wife. That's not the point that he's making, right? He's trying to do like I can live with my wife, so he can live with his wife. So therefore, the nusach of what he said doesn't make sense. He said kol she'ein poisel al yidei acherim, but really what he should have said is kol she'ein poisel al yidei atzmai, Ain't it posel al yedei acher. So that cannot be what Rabbi Yossi means. The Ella, maybe this is what Rabbi Yossi means. Ki heichi the H's gisoi asura. Maybe he's coming l'chumra. The same way that my brother-in-law is usher to his wife, ishtainami asira. His wife is also usher to him. So now Rabbi Yosef is saying a big chumrah. So then let's look at the nusach that he said. The nusach, what he said was, let's look at the words inside of the Mishnah. He said, if your brother-in-law is also to live with his wife, you're also going to be possible to live with your wife. That makes perfect sense. But where is that relevant? Right? He's saying we're both usher. Where are we both mutter? So we need to understand the second half of what he said. So let's have a look. Zog to Gemara, Elamai, what are you going to say? That makes perfect sense in the first half of his comment. Whoever, since the other is usher to his wife, I'm usher to my wife. But what is the second half of his clause? Is that if he's not usher, I'm not usher, where is that relevant? Omar Rabami, I'll tell you where it's relevant. It's relevant Areisha. It's relevant to the last Mishnah. The last Mishnah said, Nisan al pi bezdin. If she got married al pi bezdin, then Teitze ufatura min akarba. If it was al pi bezdin, which means al pi erechad, then she's usher to her husband, and she doesn't bring a carbon because we say it was a hayra. But al pi edim. But if she got married based on two edim, not because of a hayra, then Teitze v'chayeves b'karbon. Then she's also usher and she's chayeves b'karbon. Yafa koicha shel bezdin, the koicha le bezdin is stronger. Shepater min carbon, it patters her from the carbon. Because Amar Tanakama, and the Tanakama said, loishna al pi edim. It doesn't make a difference if it was al pi edim. The Eishis Gisoi Shari. If it was al pi edim, Eishis Gisoi would be mutter because she was nenas, right? If it was edim, if two edim came and said that they both died, then in this case she would be mutter to her husband when he comes back. But loishna al pi bezdin, or even if it's al pi bezdin, the Eishis Gisoi Asura, where his sister-in-law will be usher to her husband, regardless, he himself is mutter to his wife. That's what the Tanakama said. Because Amal Rabbi Yosy, and Rabbi Yosy said back, Al pi bezdin, the poisel al yidei acherim, Al pi bezdin, where my sister-in-law is going to be usher to her husband, poisel al yidei atman. My wife is also going to be usher to me, but Al pi edim. But if there were edim, two edim, the ina poisel al yidei acherim, then my sister-in-law will not be usher to her husband, because with two edim, she's considered an oidness, and a poisel al yidei atman. So it will be mutter to him. So based on this understanding of Rabbi Yosy is saying that although according to the Tanakama, regardless, he's mutter to his wife, because the worst thing that happened here was that he lived illegally with his sister-in-law, and that doesn't usher him on his wife. But his sister-in-law will be usher on her husband because his sister-in-law was an Eshish, and she got married al pi erechad. And since the erechad was wrong, since the husband was really alive, she's going to be usher on her husband. Right? That's what the Tanakama held. That was on thing until now. If Yosy comes along, it makes a chumrah and says, if she's usher, I'm also going to be usher. What would the reason be? It's all with the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan are going to answer. If the Rabbanan are going to answer her, the Rabbanan answers him as well. Let's have a look at Rashi. Because Amar le Rabbi Yosy commented to the Tanakama. Actually, let's go to the Rashi before. Amar Bami. Hi kol she'enei posel areisha kol. It's going on the Reisha. The Ari be'enei posel al yidei acher. The Reisha is speaking where there were two Edim who said she could get married, and therefore even the sister-in-law can stay married to her husband because there were two Edim who said that her husband died. The Ari lo ilban. This is al pi Edim teitze. But he muteris l'bayla. If this is al pi edim, she has to leave her second husband, but she's mutter to her first husband because she was an oinus. The Katani Seifa, the Seifa says, the Achach Basa Ishtoi, right? The Seifa is our Mishnah, that there's a case where he was living with her sister-in-law, and then his wife came back from her trip. Muteris Lachser Loi, he's allowed to continue living with his wife. Loishnal Pi Edim, it doesn't matter if two Edim came and told him originally his wife died, and that's why he married his sister-in-law. And they told his sister-in-law that your husband died. So in that case, the Eishes Gisha Shari, Lachser Labaila, where his sister-in-law can also go back to marry her husband, because she's also an onions, because she also had two Edim who said her husband died. But even if there's only an Eid Echad, where the Eishes Gisha Asura, his sister-in-law will be also to her husband, because she got married without a proper Daiku Mitzvah. But Ishtai Shari, even though he shouldn't have lived with his sister-in-law, it doesn't ask his wife. That's the Tanakh Shita. Because Amalei Rabbi Yosy, Ba'alpi Bezdin Paligna Allah. I argue upon you by Alpi Bezdin, because I hold the Hoyle Postal Idei Chayim, since your sister-in-law is also to her husband, Postal Idei Atzmai, we're also going to usher you to your wife. But I agree to you that if we got married originally because there were two Edim, then Sai, my sister-in-law, is mutter to her husband, and Sai, I'm mutter to my wife. Okay, it's a little bit late. We're not going to be able to do Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka because Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka is the one who has a whole new shot in the sugya. So we'll stop here, and we'll be mamshich on Shabbos, and maybe we'll learn a little bit extra on Shabbos so that we can get through this and Shabbos' blot, because this last shtickle is a little bit complicated. Okay, Gavaldik, have a wonderful day, a wonderful Shabbos. Have a good Shabbos.